It's time again for another installment of The Basics, and on today's show, getting back into the Star Trek CCG, I want to talk about some interrupts. And these particular interrupts, I wouldn't say they're underappreciated, but sometimes people just don't even think of them, and they can be a great help to any deck. So I'm going to talk a bit about these handful of interrupts I have here and how and when to use them. So let's get started, shall we? So anyone that plays the Star Trek CCG that has spent a lot of time building decks and playing a lot of games will notice that interrupt cards can change the face of the game, turn it in your favor, or sometimes you can screw yourself over before you screw your opponent over. We all have our favorite interrupts that we like to use, but there's also interrupts that, in my opinion, get neglected sometimes or just not thought about. For example, Particle Fountain. If two engineers present in away team, play Particle Fountain, maximum of 1, on just completed planet mission for bonus points. I have used this in a deck before. I've kept one in the deck and one in the queues tent that I could download or play at a moment's notice. Good to have if you want to score 5 extra bonus points and if you're done with all the dilemmas on a mission and have those two engineers on the away team. Might as well score some points, right? Data Laughing nullifies Calamarain or doubles Data's head this turn, or retakes one ship controlled by Lore returns so that Lore and Rogue Borg now follow your direction. If you're playing against a friend who has one of those Rogue Borg fetishes where he keeps pulling them out at random and increasing them and going after you, this is a great way to counteract that. This is something I would keep exclusively in the queues tent. If you put it in your draw deck, and unless you have a few of them in there, you may or may not be able to get it out. Senior Staff Meeting. Plays on ship with Officer, Engineer, Medical, Science, and Security aboard, so 5 different classes. Just before the initial attempt of a space mission. First dilemma encountered is discarded. That can be huge on a space mission, especially depending on what your opponent has put under there. The first one you encounter, the topmost dilemma, could be nasty. This gets rid of that. Magnetic North. Plays on your ship that has no staffing requirements if it is orbiting a planet. Prevents battles from being initiated against that ship. Discard interrupt when ship moves. How many times have we as players have a small ship with no staffing requirements, such as a shuttlecraft, a runabout, or one of the smaller non-aligned ships, yada yada yada, and your enemy either decloaks or shows up on his turn and blows it to smithereens before you have a chance? This takes care of that, gives you an extra turn to think about what you can do with that ship. Sense the Borg. Plays if a Borg ship, Borg personnel, Borg ship dilemma, or Rogue Borg just entered play. Download Weak Spot, or Hue, or Borg Neural Processor, or Ready Room Door. If your opponent is heavy on the Borg, either using a Borg deck or the ship dilemma and Rogue Borg, this could help you and change the game significantly. This is not a card you want to ignore. Scan Cycle Check. Plays on your transporter skill. Your ship's there, decloak/dephase, while that personnel operates transporters, then recloak, rephase. Or nullifies scan or full planet scan. And this is the part of the card that I would use it for. Nullifying scan or full planet scan. That can be huge. The last thing you want is your opponent to be looking through or doing that or giving himself time to figure out what you've got, what you're going to be doing. The first part on the transporter skill, that's a decent use for the card, but I have used this for that second feature of nullifying scan or full planet scan. That is huge. Wrong Door. If opponent just used Iconian Gateway, redirect the exit to another planet, or nullifies one queues tent played from hand, or move Revolving Door to a different doorway. This is something I would keep in the draw deck more than anywhere else, maybe have 2 or 3 copies of it. Comes in handy under those circumstances. And finally, all threes. Plays once each turn to reveal 2 sets of 3 cards from top of your draw deck. Take one set into hand, discard the other, opponent's choice unless you have any data in play. Of course, you want to use this with a Federation deck. This could be huge. This is something I would keep in your Q's tent, maybe 2 copies of it. As I mentioned earlier, we have our favorite interrupts, but why not try some of these in your deck in the spots I mentioned? As an addendum, let me just say that it's tough sometimes choosing between which interrupts go into either your draw deck or your side deck, because there are a lot of good interrupts that you can use. I might even be doing another episode on more interrupts, because there are a handful more that I barely use that I probably should be using in my decks more often. But again, it's a juggling act, because you have your favorites, you know there's other interrupts out there that can help you greatly, but you don't want to stray too far from the path. So it all comes down to deck building and trying to figure out what your deck is going to do. Have a great day, everybody.